All hail the king. Hey comic freaks, and welcome back to Dangerous Comics. I'm your host, Dane Georges, and today we've got a really fun one. Today we're looking at Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four Artist Edition. And I can't be more excited to look at this with you guys on the channel. Let's take a look at the full book. Here is the spine, and let's take a look at the back here. Really cool. Reed Richards holding up that cosmic rod with Jack Kirby's signature right there. It's a really, really beautiful book. I don't know if it's coming up on the camera, but there's a really cool detail of having some Kirby dots printed on the cover with a little gloss. Same thing on the back. We've got some more Kirby dots picking up the light. And there's a few different covers for this. I got the one with Dr. Doom on the front, looming over the FF. Let's just dive in, because we got a lot to look at, and oh my god, wow, they do not hold back right from the start. Get this amazing shot of the Thing yelling, "And in case you think Stretcho's kidding, it's clobbering time," as he punches all these alpha primitives right toward the camera. And I have a really fun edition of this book. They did 125 copies that Joe Sinnott actually signed. And that's really noteworthy because all the stories in this book were inked by Joe Sinnott. So wow, just so cool. Definitely one of my favorite Jack Kirby inkers, and I think his work with Jack on the Fantastic Four is just legendary. So super cool to have this edition. And wow, we just get so many great looks at this art in close-up. I love this look of this super android floating through space. You can see up here, there's a little bit of razor work taken on the ink to cut away some of the black and kind of expose some of the page. Just Kirby dots everywhere, Kirby energy all over the page. We get an introduction by John Byrne talking about his history with the FF. And his history is notable because he went on to draw Fantastic Four later in the 1980s. And a really fun story about how he went to a used bookstore and found that somebody had liquidated their entire Marvel run, and they had everything from issue 32 all the way to 131, all for a nickel a piece, along with some X-Men and Avengers. So he ran home, begged his dad to give him some money so he could grab them. Man, what a steal. And I love these looks at these close-up headshots of both the Thing and Reed Richards. Just so much character, so much life in these drawings. And by this point in the series that we're looking at, Jack Kirby had really codified what these characters look like. And the style is just so strong. I think that is kind of helped along with Joe's inks as well. But wow, there's just so much heartfelt emotion in both of these looks as the Thing's looking over his shoulder and Reed is looking out worried. Another really cool look at a close-up panel as the Thing is getting a bomb thrown at him. Uh-oh, what in the name of Aunt Petunia is that? And here you get a cool look at what's especially cool about this edition and looking at Jack Kirby pages is that you get to see so much of Jack Kirby's writing and dialogue notes that were in the margins of the page. A big part of this is how Jack was really kind of writing and drawing this book, right? He was given the very loose plot, if anything, by Stan, and then would go off and draw this book and basically write it as well, putting that pure imagination on the page, and then Stan would kind of catch up and put some dialogue in afterwards. And that's not to downgrade all of Stan's work. I mean, he definitely has quite an amazing voice for these characters, especially the Thing. So in here we get issue 71, Fantastic Four Annual 6, Fantastic Four number 82, 83, and 84. And we dive right in with Fantastic Four number 71, and so it ends. Man, and we just get an amazing splash right off the bat of Sue just staring down the barrel of the camera. You can tell she's surprised, worried, scared, and we're going to turn the page and see what that threat is. A little bit of an interesting choice that we don't include the covers, but this is the cover to issue 71, and here you can kind of see the scale comparison of the actual printed page to the actual artboard. It's a really fun cover too of sizzling big action issue, and we see our four heroes battling this android separately. And I'm always just kind of blown away by how amazing these colors are throughout these old comics and how just punchy and vibrant they are and how they're able to draw so much attention right in. I love that magenta background and how that really draws your eye to Sue's yellow hair. Another thing to call out here before moving on is that at this point, Stan and Jack were getting produced credit, not written and drawn by. This is one of the great action thrillers ever produced by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, embellished by Joe Sinnott, lettering Sam Rosen. And we turn that page and we see what the threat is. We see this big android lumbering towards Sue, and we see that Reed, Johnny, and the Thing, Ben Grimm, are knocked out on the ground. And we have a note down here from Jack that says, Reed, Torch, knocked out in fight. And Stan gives us an instant summary department. The evil mad thinker affected the brain of the Thing, turning him against the Fantastic Four. In a last-ditch effort to save them all, Reed Richards hurled a mental wave bolt at him, and then the three combatants slowly lost consciousness. Amazing panels here of just like how we're using that black silhouette to kind of highlight the blast coming from the android's face. The story in this issue actually starts back in issue 68. This is 71. And as they said here, there was a little bit of like a mystery of who the villain was, but we start with kind of like a classic development of Reed wanting to cure Ben of his rocky exterior, and in doing so, he brings on this chemist, Dr. Santini, who is going to help him create a formula, but instead of actually helping him, he messes with the formula and ends up transforming the Thing's brain. And the process doesn't fix him at all, it just turns him evil. And we get this reveal. Dr. Santini takes this gun, this little gas blaster, and blasts his face, and all of the makeup and the hairpiece and even his mustache disappears, and we see that it is the Mad Thinker. Sue has to just shoot this Electroforce beam at the android to try to stop him, and in doing so, it hits everyone on the team and actually works in her favor because it brings everyone back to life. Also, always just love how Jack depicts Sue's invisibility, and Joe Sinnott does a great job delineating that like dashed line. Another cool look as the android is able to see Sue's silhouette. We get that panel of the Thing looking over his shoulder, and it looks like he's finally not mind controlled anymore by the Thinker, and he's himself again. And he turns to fight the android, and we see that he's pretty evenly matched. Really cool beginning to this issue too, because we really get some great like Sue Storm moments. She's often a character that's a little overlooked in this series, kind of just the wife of the team, taking care of everybody. But here we get a cool look at how she's really bringing the team back, and then even helping in ways that maybe they're not super aware of, as she's like helping Ben right there, throwing up a force field before he gets hit. We also get in an earlier part of this story, they call out that Sue redesigned her outfit and gave herself a mini skirt. So, very fashionable, very of the time. And here we get that panel that we saw a little earlier with that Joe Sinnott signature. And I love this 1-2 punch of "it's clobbering time," punches the android and he goes flying out the Baxter Building wall. And oh my God, they punch a lot of holes through the Baxter Building, but it was all a little bit too much for Sue and she passes out. And as Ben is trying to bring her back, kind of shaking her awake, Reed comes back to, and he thinks that the Thing is still evil and is now attacking his wife. But the android crashes on the ground, comes back to. Love this kind of like Frankenstein moment as he stands back up with these thrusters. And we see that the android, very well adapt to all their powers. He's able to go extremely cold to fight the Human Torch. Love this kind of texture that they're doing to show off that snow and frost that covers his body. Man, and just the way he's able to show Reed always just like all stretched out and flailing around, it's super cool. And then even doing kind of a cool, goofy moment of him turning into a giant wheel to go away. I think we often talk about, the height of the Fantastic Four being with the Galactus trilogy, which took place in issue 48 to 50. And, this is issue 71. And I think by now, Jack is even more solid in his style and the storytelling. And I think, that's definitely some of the best storytelling. But I think the creative team is just foot on the gas at all times, just telling the best stories they can. I think it's really cool they're highlighting this batch of stories, because I think this is also a cool inclusion because it leads into like the Negative Zone kind of storytelling. And here we're seeing that Reed is going to have to open the door to the Negative Zone. He vowed to never open it again. He found this subspace area back in issue 51, so it's coming back to play all the way in 71, and he kind of banishes this android to the Negative Zone, kind of using it like a phantom zone, kind of like Superman would, but nothing can survive because it's going to get pulled right into this antimatter force that will destroy all matter. So this is kind of his Hail Mary of destroying this android that is well equipped to destroy the whole team. Reed rushes back to his wife, make sure she's okay. And as everyone's kind of coming around, Reed puts Sue to sleep. It's too much stress for her. And it's also of note because at this time in the series, Sue is pregnant. And so because of this big fight, because of everything, Reed exclaims, "I can't jeopardize my wife's life any longer, especially now when she's going to have a baby." "What are you trying to say, mister?" "I'm not trying to say anything. I'm saying it. Sue and I are cutting out, and I won't be responsible for any more lives." That means the end of the FF. And so nice cliffhanger. I do think it's kind of interesting though, because Sue never looks pregnant, right? We could look back and she's even they make a big deal that she's designed this mini skirt, everything, but her frame is still very traditional. She does not look pregnant, and she never really looks pregnant throughout the whole series. So I don't know if that was something to do with the comic code, or it's just something that hey, we're making these comics for young boys and they don't want to see a pregnant woman, but it's just very interesting. She's never pregnant in this series. We then cut to Fantastic Four Annual 6, which another one we don't get the cover of, but this is when Sue gives birth. And another story that has to do with the negative zone. So I think why we kind of go on this trajectory of showing that negative zone coming back in 68 to 71, where the Mad Thinker discovers it, and then Reed has to resort to throwing the android in there, kind of brings it back up. And then in Let There Be Life, we get a big reveal that there's something wrong with the pregnancy, that something with the cosmic rays might be affecting Sue's blood and therefore could endanger the life of her baby. And this issue is copyright 1968, and the last issue being copyright 1967. But Reed is looking at his machines. He's mad. He's frantic. Something's up. He's got a problem to solve, and he's wanting to solve it on his own and not bring in the rest of the team because he knows how dangerous it could be to bring in everyone, because he's been to the negative zone before and he knows just the cost of going. But the boys aren't going to let him go on his own. Ben and Johnny volunteer right away, and Reed is very touched by their gesture and says, "All right, we don't have much time to waste. Let's go." Putting on a harness and giving Ben one as well that they're going to use in the negative zone. And we get a look into the negative zone, more about maybe what lives there, and they introduce Annihilus. We don't get a view of him yet, but we see him just destroying all life there. And really cool look at the ship that he rides in. I love that everything about his design is very bug-like, and you can see here there's a good amount of whiteout throughout on Annihilus's face, so I believe they're either taking away some detail or adding something. It looks like they're usually adding something to do with this egg tooth that he has, and maybe just taking off some extra details that were in the face mask. But very interesting to see that kind of detail in here. And our team is having to go into the negative zone. Reed has done this once before in issue 51, and he almost died. So that is why he's so wary to bring more people in. But they have to. They go on in, they jump through the barrier. And I love here that it seems like Stan definitely leaned very heavily on what Jack was putting in the notes. He says, they were going into the distortion area. It looks weird because the human vision is not developed to see it. And that's something that Reed is saying in here as well. He says, "Our human vision needs a few minutes to readjust itself, to correctly transmit such alien image to our brains," which is so cool. Really playing up what going into another universe, another world would be like, that it would be so alien to our minds that we wouldn't be able to comprehend it. And we get this amazing panel here that kind of reminds me of what Ditko would do in Doctor Strange and a lot of his books, but with that Kirby spin on it. Not as soft, it's a little bit more harsh angles. And man, here is the coolest part of the book, I think. We get to see this look at how Jack made these collage spreads. And we get on the left side just how they laid out the characters before they were cut out and placed on the collages, and the word balloons as well. Just really cool to see that kind of production work of it. And they're saying, I love the notes that we're getting from Jack here. Reed near the bottom of page 6, Ben and Johnny near middle of page 7, and then how they have to decrease it by 60%. And then down here we see it actually in the layout, and it's much smaller than the other boards that we've been looking at. So it was kind of shrunk down to more actual comic size. Here it is in comparison to the actual comic. You can see it is kind of a 1-to-1 size more at this point. There is still some whiteout on there, so they're making a little bit of corrections, but there's a little bit more of that fidelity in the actual collage work. This area down here is kind of getting lost in the actual printed work, there's like some kind of like isometric squares and everything, but some of that's getting a little bit lost in the kind of printing techniques of the time. Jack is really swinging for the fences here and just trying to depict comics and storytelling in a way that maybe we haven't seen before. Like, how do you show what's it like to go into another universe? How do you see inhuman sights? How does your brain process that? And I love that distortion zone into this where it's like, whoa, that's why their brain couldn't understand it. It's almost like these flat 2D people are now being pulled into a 3D world. It's just so cool. And this is the second time that Jack has done this. This is looking at the Fantastic Four Essentials Volume 3, in that with issue 51, which is a classic, just one of the best Fantastic Four issues, This Man, This Monster. Reed is going into subspace, into the negative zone, and in doing so, he also has to go through the distortion zone, another great way that Jack kind of codifies that and draws it, and then we get to see his view, the first view of this kind of collaged negative zone, and wow, it is just so cool. What a freaking amazing piece of pop art. Just so stunning. So I love that he kind of codified that and then brought it back when he was going to bring the negative zone back again. And in issue 70 of the Kirby Collector, we also get a cool look of that page in color detail. Cool to see, you know, what the actual collage looked like photographed, because I've only really seen it in that black and white of the Essentials edition. So cool to see that there's actually some color difference, some color grading of like these planets and these worlds that Reed is seeing. It's just stunning. And I love this note below that says, Reed drifts in dimensional space. It's both weird and beautiful. And it is. It totally is, Jack. And then we get another cool look at just a collage that Kirby did here for himself, just something that he did in 69, just a personal collage work. So this is a guy whose brain was always cooking, always trying to make something new, always thinking of how he could depict something different, how he could show something that only existed in his imagination on the printed page. Just such a fun transition back to the world of Kirby. And as they're drifting through the negative zone, a little scavenger comes out and grabs Reed and puts him on this magnetic trap, pulling him back down. There's also whiteout throughout on this harness that Reed had. So it might have been that Jack forgot to draw it, or it got kind of added a little later, or maybe it like kind of changed how it worked. But it looks like throughout, when they were wearing the harness, they kind of had to add it back in. And there's even a little whiteout here where it says, they're reaching for my harness. So I think maybe they had to kind of try to unify or fix some continuity of like when they had the harness and when they didn't. Cut back and we see that Crystal's dealing with the doctors, and we get an explanation of the energy in Sue's blood through the microscope and how that is going to be problematic for her and the baby. So kind of setting up that tension of the real world to the negative zone. Then Ben and Johnny are trapped, and we meet Annihilus face to face, and wow, what a cool design. More whiteout here is like kind of figuring out his design on the page a bit, fixing how the earpiece works. But wow, I love just that like open mouth laugh. He looks so maniacal, so alien. Something about the way Jack Kirby would draw these characters too, of like how they're almost like puppet mouths, of like how they would open and be so expressive. The Thing definitely kind of has a Muppet mouth, kind of like that. Annihilus is just annihilating everyone, and where he's drawing his power from is this cosmic control rod. This part is something that I think there's a little bit of a difference between what Jack is putting on the page to what Stan scripted. I think maybe Stan made it a little bit more kid-friendly, made it a little bit more light, because this guy who is collecting life forms seems to be doing it for a more maniacal purpose than how we're showing it here. We get a note up here that says he's hunting good intellect and power, and we see that he has a cage full of these like alien creatures, and Reed got dropped into the cage as well. And he's pointing at Reed, wanting him, but Reed strikes back, kind of showing a little bit of power that maybe the others don't have. And here's another moment where, now the harness is just completely whited out on all these instances of Reed. So I think there was a little bit of a storytelling thing that happened, like, oh, he's got to get rid of the harness because they need it back later. lucky for Reed, as soon as he meets Annihilus, he realizes that this guy holds the key to what he came to the negative zone for. He has this cosmic control rod, and I found what I came here for. Good circumstance for Reed, kind of just happened into finding exactly what he needed. And here's the sequence I think that kind of strays farthest away from what Jack was intending, and Stan changes it in the dialogue, because he just is saying, like, these people have outlived their usefulness, and then he blasts them. But I think there's not really a great explanation of like where the cosmic rod is getting its powers from, because later in the story they talk about that it's running out of power, or they don't want to run out of power for it. But to me it seems like this sequence is trying to show that the cosmic rod is anti-matter, anti-life, and it is actually being powered by death and destruction. So it's getting its power from killing off all these life forms. It's creating antimatter, which I think kind of goes back to also like some of what Jack would explore with New Gods, with the anti-life equation with Darkseid. But Reed needs to get this control rod and kind of stands his ground against Annihilus. The negative zone is definitely the antimatter universe. It's not just like a zone. It's not just like a pocket universe. It's supposed to be the opposite of our universe, kind of like a negative universe of ours where we exist on matter and the negative zone exists on antimatter. And I think it kind of goes back and forth a little bit throughout this story. Reed is definitely here for antimatter to try and save Sue, but they keep calling it, the cosmic rod, but the cosmic rod is powered by antimatter, but, they got their powers through cosmic rays. I think it's just kind of bouncing back and forth with the terminology a little bit, but I think Jack intended it more for just pure antimatter, that's what Reed is here for. And it's kind of this play of like needing something so alien and so anti-life to save the life of his child. And they get put into this trap. We see that Annihilus is watching them through behind glass, and he wants to kind of like play with them like the little toys that he sees them as. And then we get just a classic sequence of Jack Kirby just exploring the powers, having fun with these heroes. How do you get them from A to B? We get great stretching stuff from Reed. Ben gets crushed by this giant boot. A big gyro saw comes out of the wall, and then a sonic sponge attacks the Human Torch. And I love that that's just what Stan goes with, because that's exactly what Jack put in the margins. Just a torch is attacked by a sonic sponge. And I'm sure Stan was just like, okay, Jack, whatever you say. And I love just that wacky design of that sponge just coming after him, just trying to put out his fire. He's able to take out the sponge with a blast, and then helps Reed take out the saw. And then when they get back to the thing, and he's like, oh, I was just waiting for you guys. I was just resting. I didn't want to do this without anyone seeing me do it. And then he crushes the boot. It's so much fun. I love this look at the thing that Jack does, where he's able to like turn that head in every angle and really draw it. And I love that look of the brow kind of from below. Looks so nice. And, they get out, they're able to smash the glass and come through. We get a great, it's clobbering time. Man, just amazing lettering there. And they're able to get the cosmic rod from Annihilus while he's passed out. Great close-up on these faces and the circuitry of the rod. More tech as they steal his plane and go. It's almost like a Gollum and the Ring kind of thing, as Annihilus is like, my control rod, it's gone. They have stolen my most priceless possession. Without it, immortality can never be mine. So kind of that whole thing of like how he's taking life to gain life. And so he sends these borers after them. Great view. It's almost like they're breaking out of the page, coming toward us. Like it's a blank slate, almost like the blank page, and then they're coming right at us. Great design. They're kind of like these weird rhinoceros, platypus, amphibian, reptile thing. It's so cool. Just the inventive character designs that Jack is doing here on the page for us. But they are boring, because they're borers. They bore through the ground and they get to this ship that they stole, and they're going to cut right through it. Nothing can stop them. And they're even a little too strong for the Thing. He's struggling to kind of fight them back. And just at that moment, Reed makes it a gamble and uses the power of the cosmic rod, or the cosmic control, as they call it here. He just kind of keeps changing names. This panel is so cool. Love the Kirby crackle, Reed in silhouette. And that is this back page that we use here. It looks so great. Just love seeing where those moments came from, that they pulled them out. But with it, he's able to use his mind. The power of the mind is what controls the cosmic rod, which is just like the perfect thing for Reed Richards to find, right? This big brainiac, smart guy is able to find the power of his mind. And just more views of how he still had that harness here, and then they had to get rid of it because he needs to get it back at the very end. Great ship designs. Here's a look at the colors for that panel where Reed is holding up the cosmic rod. I love just the way they colored the blue against his magenta for the ship. And then this is such a cool panel of using that blue as kind of like a framing device as the ship flies out. Great splash as they're getting hit by Annihilus's ray gun. Here's another example of just really leaning into just that pure magenta and yellow and blue, and that orange of the thing really makes that pop as he's right in the center. But Reed is able to save everybody as he throws out his arms so they can grab on, and they kind of pull themselves to safety. But when they do, they land on this rock, and this is kind of taking us back to what happened in Fantastic Four 51, as they are on this rock being pulled toward this antimatter Earth. And in this moment, they're a little bit helpless. They're unsure if they're going to be able to get out. And we get like a cool explanation, that what I was saying a little earlier about like what the negative zone is, that it's a little bit more just this antimatter universe, not just like this pocket zone. And they're kind of looking at this world and speculating that this anti-Earth could also have grown life forms in the same way that our world did. And there could be even an intelligent society on this world. But if they were to ever meet, antimatter and matter combining would just explode. It could destroy an entire world. I wonder why they didn't go that route with just Annihilus. It doesn't seem like Annihilus is part of this, right? Or any of the other creatures that they've encountered along the way. It's kind of like this world is kind of a separate thing with the antimatter, but then they've been able to touch or fight all these other people without that kind of consequence. So it's a little interesting. It's almost like there's the antimatter world, and then around it is this pocket of matter that's getting pulled from the other universes and coming into antimatter. Interesting thing to explore. I feel like it's not fully explored in this issue. And Reed is now able to make a little bargain with Annihilus. He gives him the rod back, but he's able to steal a little bit of the energy and put it in this container that he had. They get their harnesses back, and they're able to jettison off this asteroid at the last minute before they collide with the antimatter. And right in that last moment, he hurls the rod and makes Annihilus go fetch it. There's a little bit of a cutout there of Johnny and Ben as they're kind of floating away there. It's a little redraw, and I like how Ben is breaking the border. Getting close to the end of this issue as we see the gang flying through space. Just amazing. Just look at all that Kirby crackle and everything. All the planets in this antimatter universe, just as beautiful as our universe, just as much to explore, but even more dangerous. It's really interesting that Jack chose to depict this just in ink and didn't use a collage here. Just beautiful in the inks. But they go through the distortion area again. I love it. I love the polka dots, and there's this paper airplane there. Very Ditko, like I said. And they come through the barrier, and now they're in the waiting room waiting for Sue to give birth. Luckily, Reed was able to get them the antimatter. He was able to get them what he pulled from the cosmic rod, and hopefully it's enough to save her and the baby's life. They're sitting there worried, just that tension. Oh, is it going to work? Is she going to have the baby? Love this close-up of Ben's face. We're all jumpy. They're all feeling this. They're feeling worried about Sue, worried about their teammate. And then they get the announcement that there was a baby, and it's a boy. He's an absolute darling. That means I'm an uncle. Sue's all right. And I have a son. Like my dear old Aunt Petunia would say, well, what do you know? And so they're all celebrating. And then we finally get Sue back in the story. And wow, she looks just heavenly as she's just given birth to this baby. And we get one little view of who's going to be Franklin Richards. He doesn't even get a name in this issue. One look at him, and then we just see the back of the blanket after that. Just very interesting. Jack draws a nice baby. It's not like one of those freaky, weird comic babies where they don't really know how to draw a baby. Also, a redraw of Reed's mouth there, so I wonder if the expression was a little different. But we get the beginning. So really fun, nice family moment. Just weird that we never saw Sue pregnant, and we really don't get much of the baby. They're really trying to inject some real world problems or like some adult things, but then they kind of are shying away from it at the end because they know it's still a kid's comic. Another great zoom in on this panel. Love that expression from the Thing. And we get to Fantastic Four 82. And this is going to be a continued story from 82 to 83. And this is Mark of a Madman. Another great, we started this whole book off with that just like shot of Sue's face looking directly at the reader. And we kind of do the same thing here with Crystal, really using those eyes, the window of the soul to pull in the reader. A lot of Marvel comics would use really dramatic splash pages to kind of be a second cover. And I think Jack is kind of exploring something here about like using maybe a quiet moment, but pulling you in with a character, pulling you in with the character's eyes. We reveal that Crystal needs to go back and ask permission from the Inhumans to become part of the team because she is now going to be replacing Sue since she just had the baby. And Reed says, I should have thought of that, young lady. After all, you're still a minor, which is like, she's been dating the Human Torch for quite a while. And I believe the Human Torch, when they started the Marvel Universe off, he's the same age as Peter Parker. Like they're both high school kids going into college. I think at this point, Peter Parker would at least be in college. So Human Torch is, 18 plus. So, I don't know. I don't know how old Crystal's supposed to be here, but Human Torch is definitely dating a minor. That's canon. Dramatic shot here as they're kind of like worried because there was a big part of the story early on in Fantastic Four where she got trapped under the dome that covered the Inhumans city and she was separated from Johnny for quite a while. So he's finally got her back, but worried they might lose her again. And just then Lockjaw comes in. They're transporting Inhuman Dog. I love how Jack Kirby draws Lockjaw. He's kind of like a dog, but very alien at the same time. Super cool. But behind Lockjaw comes the Alpha Primitives, the Inhumans' deadly drone race. And this instantly alerts the Fantastic Four that something is off. This isn't just a normal visit from the Inhumans. Here we get that panel that was the first end page. Man, so cool. It's already I love how Jack Kirby's giving us a 2-panel page. That is just gorgeous. And I love that, we go from this 4-panel page to a 2-panel page. Jack Kirby's really just playing with the format, really opening up the page for us to give us big action. And they get Crystal, pull her back through, and leave the Fantastic Four behind. And then we get back to the Inhuman city, and we see what's going on. Maximus the Mad is now in charge, and we see that all of the other Inhumans are kind of at his beck and call. They are kind of enslaved by him. Love this armor that Jack has given him. So foreboding and powerful. And just like wild, big crown dome design. It just looks so heavy. Heavy as the crown, right? I love this face. Kind of reminds me of like a parademon. This is an interesting drawing there of Medusa. The style reminds me a little bit more of like a John Romita. It doesn't really seem in line with how Jack draws women. So I wonder if this is like a redraw from the bullpen or if that's just Joe Sinnott kind of like embellishing a little bit and making Medusa a bit prettier. They get back and we see that the rest of the Inhumans are also enslaved and they're in this cage. And I just love the traps and all this cool Kirby tech that we always get. He's always just never giving us like a boring cage, right? Like it's got to be something different. They're in this glass case with the Kirby crackle behind it. And we see that it's Black Bolt, Gorgon, Triton, and Karnak are all trapped in here, like the main Inhumans. And the Fantastic Four shoots off to go save them. I love, like I was saying earlier, I love that view of the Thing. Just like Jack Kirby could turn his head at every angle and kind of give us a new look at him. And they land over there, and instantly they're put into a trap as well. And here we see them going against another android of the Inhumans that fights them. This is Zor, and Zor has a really cool design. I really love his, he kind of looks like a big gorilla. Love his big sharp teeth. But he is able to make quick work of the Fantastic Four. He's perfectly designed to take them out. And I think it's interesting because, we started this story off with them fighting the Mad Thinkers android, and now they're going off to fight an Inhuman android. And I think that is kind of a sign of the times, or even just a sign of where Jack's head is at, right? Like he is wanting them to be these future fighters. They're like these heroes of the future, kind of like the evolution of the Marvel hero being like these science monsters, where the Fantastic Four is kind of like these science heroes, and they're going against all this sci-fi stuff, kind of. And maybe it is inspired a little bit by Star Trek and other media of the time, but a lot of androids in these Fantastic Four stories. And we see that Maximus's plan is that he has a hypno gun that he's going to use to enslave the entire planet, not just the Inhumans. And we get Fantastic Four number 83, Shall Man Survive? Reed, Johnny, and Ben are still trapped, and they just can't seem to find a way out. Maximus is taking a bath. We see that he's kind of enslaved the other Inhumans too, and they're not really wanting to help him, but they really have no choice. He's their new leader. Gets another cool kingly armor change. Jack gave us that awesome design in the last issue, and then he's like, yeah, let's change it up. Let's give him another look as he's going to go to his coronation. This head is bigger than my hand. Like, what a big drawing to do of a human's face. We cut back to the main Inhumans that are trapped, and Black Bolt is going to have to use his deadly voice to break free. And he's worried because, just using this in this enclosed area could kill the other Inhumans, but he's able to use his voice with perfect precision and break free. And when he does that, the hypno spell is shattered, and we see that, everyone is actually not trapped by the means that Magnus was saying. They're actually trapped by the prison of their mind. And I think Jack is, playing up a lot of looking at dictatorship and fascism and how these people want to control the way you think. And I think that's coming through with his villains and how they're using this hypno gun to try to enslave the whole world, and how really the prison that these guys in is one that they can get out of if they just change the way they think. They go against Zor again, and when they take him out, they realize he also has a hypno device in him. So he was the reason that they got hypnotized, and they're able to stop him in time. Man, just these gigantic cannons and the tech, and look how he's able to depict all these people in the crowd in the background. Super impressive work. And man, just an amazing full screen view too here of it's clobbering time. I love how that's going behind Zor and just getting punched right at the camera. And I like the moments that we're choosing to break the frame, like with this exclamation mark, but then the hands of Zor behind the panel. I think it really gives like a 3D effect, like his head is getting closer to the viewer. That's the closest part. And we see here how he's going to enslave everyone, but everyone comes in and they're able to stop him just in time. The Inhumans are back, the Fantastic Four is back, and then we get the reunion of Johnny and his minor girlfriend, Crystal. And Karnak is like, Crystal! He's not into that. He's like, hey, cut that out. But then in the last minute, Maximus is able to escape with his rocket, so he will be a problem for them again in the future. Another great view of Crystal with her elemental powers, which is cool. A cool addition to the team, having another elemental, because they are kind of elemental heroes, right? We have like earth, fire, water, and then I think you could say Sue is like wind with invisibility and force fields, and Crystal is able to kind of be all that in one as an elemental hero. So she definitely fits the mold. And now we get to the final issue, Fantastic Four 84. And this is The Name is Doom. So I think you can guess we're going to see our guy, Dr. Doom. And look, I love how there's like literal tape on the board holding Johnny down in place. I wonder what he looked like. And as they're flying, they come into contact with some SHIELD ships that ask them to land. Which is cool that we get to see Jack drawing Nick Fury and some SHIELD agents, because, he has that history with war comics and these characters. And as they're telling them to land, we cut to this mysterious castle. And I love these kind of caption boxes that are arrows. It's really fun way to draw your eye over. And we see that there's an escaped scientist. He's trying to make his way to the water, but it's too good to be true. Right when he gets to this boat waiting for him, there's a gun pointing at him, and it's Dr. Doom. And oh my God, what an amazing, iconic splash page. This is probably one of the most iconic depictions of Dr. Doom. And he's just got his like Doombot soldiers behind him, this like pure Jack Kirby ray gun. Oh, he looks so intimidating, so powerful, so regal, just amazing. Joe Sinnott's inks are just so good too. I love like how he's giving us like a thinner line on this circle, but then really laying in thick with a brush on these outlines and everything, really knowing when to punch it up and when to kind of set back with these kind of circle organic shapes. Man. And he shoots this scientist and takes him back to the castle, and Doom says, "How ungrateful are those who will not accept the rule of Dr. Doom. Do I not give them shelter, provide them with food? And all I ask is total, blind obedience." And I think that goes back to, some of the themes that I was just talking about with Maximus, how Kirby, he's been through the war. He's seen, what fascism looks like. And he's exploring that in superhero comics too, with characters like Maximus the Mad and Doctor Doom, and what it means to have a ruler that doesn't even just want to control you, but wants to control how you think. It's revealed that this scientist that Doom just took out is one of their guys, and he was able to send them back this robot arm that they were developing before he was taken out. And it kind of is able to just be activated on its own. It flies and it punches Johnny in the face, and it even goes and it grabs a gun. So it's like fully independent. It doesn't need the head or any other pieces of the robot to be dangerous. It's just dangerous on its own. And that's another piece of what I was talking about, another android, So we've had like almost every story in this book has been android focused, thought focused, or fascist focused. So there's a lot of themes that I think Jack was really interested in exploring toward the end of his Fantastic Four run. But the Torch destroys that robot, and then Dum Dum Dugan has to sweep it up so they can still send the pieces to Stark, because they said, we're going to send that to Tony Stark to analyze it. So he's just going to send him like the rubble. The Fantastic Four now having to go kind of undercover to go to Latveria, and they're going through this village, this kind of like communist village. Which is interesting because, a lot of the early Marvel stories had to do with communism or the Soviets or, the Cold War and how they were the villains. But now we're showing like, and what Doctor Doom represents is even worse than that. They're kind of willing to talk to these guys to get through because they're going to try to fight an even bigger threat, kind of showing that threat of fascism is even bigger. And the way that Jack draws these villages is super cool. It's a very different kind of look than how he would draw Manhattan or New York or the Baxter Building. I did an early review of the origin of the Red Skull, and some of that is also present in that issue. So I'll link that here. You should check that out. But love how he's kind of got that different style for like a village versus a city. And as they're driving, love these trees in the foreground, really setting the stage, giving us a feel for this environment. And as they're driving through, their car is just ripped apart from magnets. And now these Doombot soldiers descend on them. I don't know if anyone could do these 4-panel pages as well as Jack, because, it's a kind of a tricky situation. You're just kind of left with this target area where your eye goes. But somehow Jack is able to really pull your attention to all this. And I think it's the way he's doing the storytelling of, he's using Reed's stretching ability, kind of go over with the gun. We come back here. They're using it to deflect. This leg takes you down here. And then he once again uses Reed's arm to go from here to pull you back down. And then in that flow, bring you to the final panels. This perfect Z reading formation of these 4 panels, and doesn't get you hung up in the center of the page. And he really knows when to open that up for the Thing to just do some clobbering. We saw this panel early in the book next to the table of contents where they're throwing that bomb at the Thing, and he ends up punching it, trying to take it out, and it ends up being a gas bomb. So he plays himself, and it knocks him out, and they take in the Fantastic Four. Cool look of Doom and profile with this gas mask on. And man, here's another great panel just setting the stage, setting tone, right? And just showing how, like, when you draw comics, you really need to know how to draw everything, or at least have an extensive reference file. Latveria has such a cool design to it that, like, the exterior looks very, like, traditional village-like, but then inside we're still seeing a lot of, like, Kirby tech isms. It's kind of this cool mixture of, like, the old world meeting the new. And I think we're seeing, like a lot of people that are happy. We're seeing kind of like this idealistic setting, even though they're being controlled by such a monster. And then we turn the page and we see Doom watching them on his monitors. And I think this is where we see, taking away the facade of like the village setting. And we're seeing, really what Dr. Doom is. He's that supervillain brooding down in his lair. Something is evil. Something is rotten under the surface. He says, "But for now, I prefer to toy with them. There is no need for haste, since I have rendered them totally helpless. A pity they do not yet suspect it. But how could they suspect that while they slept, I have hypnotically drained them of their power? Whenever they may want to use them, their hypnotized brains will instantly reject the notion." A lot of repeated themes, right? Even just one issue ago, Maximus was trying to use a hypno gun to take over the whole world, and now we're here with Dr. Doom, and it's quickly revealed that he is also using hypnotics to control his lackeys, to control his people. Not even just fear-mongering, he's literally toying with their minds, playing with what is the truth. And, everyone's happy, everyone's love and friendship, welcome Fantastic Four, and it's just not the kind of world they're expecting to find in Latveria, and everyone's so happy to see them. But they kind of are suspicious, and they all kind of meet back up. They find Crystal, and they're going to try to get away. Reed says, "I'll prove to you how free everyone really is. Stand back. I'm making a dash for the border." And then as soon as he does, he hits some kind of wall. Reed, he was stopped in his tracks by a stun blast. And then out of the ground comes this video board, kind of coming to the surface as this evilness of doom. "Very foolish of you, citizen. You activated the automatic sentry device. This will be your first and last warning. Nobody ever leaves Latveria. You will remain here and be eternally happy, or else you die." So really fun intro to another Fantastic Four story. I love that we got an inclusion of Doctor Doom in here. This story goes for like 4 more issues. I believe it concludes in issue 88. So a little bit more to explore there. I just think it's really interesting how there's a lot of similar themes throughout this book, right, that I've kind of pointed out, with the Fantastic Four going against futuristic robots, kind of the Fantastic Four going against the future itself, and this idea of people in power really trying to control the way people think. And most of that not even being through lies, but literal mind control. And here we end on Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four Gallery, which is really cool. We get a few more pieces. We get some covers, some splash pages, and then some more interior pages. Here is the cover to the actual book that we were looking at with issue 86. Love seeing how all the type was plastered up on the page. You can see how this Doctor Doom was even like cut out. You can see some edges around him, and then how they had to put the logo behind him. Just love that kind of bits of production. Look at the Mole Man taking on the whole team. Covered a king-sized Fantastic Four number 7, more Mole Man, and I love how he's holding that caption box, and it looks like he is just 100% pasted in or whited out so they could draw it in. And man, this is one of my favorite Jack Kirby pages. I love how he decided to show that motion by just leaving the negative space to show where the Silver Surfer is flying. And I think this kind of shows off what I was talking about, how Jack would depict a city versus how he was depicting like the old world of like a village like Latveria. There's something that kind of reads like a circuit board for how he draws Manhattan. It just feels like it's all a part of a larger piece of technology. Then we get this page of Wynn Calls Galactus, and this is from issue 74. Man, the page is very yellow. It's so much more worn than some of the other pages we've been looking at. Really cool splash here, and I love how Jack has incorporated this 4 into the design. Sam Rosen or Artie Simek just really flexing on us, doing different layouts, different fonts, just really being bold and in your face regardless, though. Here we get another look at Franklin. I think he might finally have a name here, right? Yeah, here is where Franklin finally gets his name. "So you finally picked a moniker for the kid? Well, how about cluing a fella in?" Reed says, "We've decided to call him Franklin, after his grandfather." It's like they let that kid not have a name for quite a while. This is number 94, and they finally tell us what the kid's name is. But really cool seeing them in the reflection of the camera lens. And it's like very much based on a real camera, but then full Kirby tech all over it. So it kind of lets you know this is maybe something a little different, maybe something a little bit more futuristic. Or it's just Kirby can't help himself and he just has to like embellish everything. Ooh, I love this page from 95 of the Thing holding up like a whole city block on his back. And you can tell that this just comes from Jack's own personal history of like being a kid, living on the street with his street gangs. It feels very lived in and well informed. Some really great mood lighting and shadowing on Johnny's face here as he's so sad that Crystal is going to be leaving him. Joe Sinnott just killed it with those inks there, these swooping brush strokes. He really knew how to interpret Jack's line art. Man, Mystery of the Moon, Reed's in the foreground, just kind of looking a little devious with those shadows too. Man, more Kirby tech all over the place. And then, wow, comes from issue 98, this amazing view of this like mountain in the water. Wow. Just talk about what Joe Sinnott is bringing to the page here, how he's choosing to give a little bit more texture and leaving a little bit more space between the lines here for the actual inky rock texture, and then how he's leaving more swooping brush strokes for the water, and then the Kirby crackle up there like the smoke rising from the fire. Feels volcanic, feels primal. It's amazing. A few more actual pages here. Here we have one from issue 70. Here is the actual page for reference. Reed versus the Mad Thinker. And another just great representation of how he would lead your eye through the page. That arm swoops up, his head comes down. Both of these heads lead you down into this and then back over. Man, just amazing. Masterclass in comic storytelling. And on the opposite page, we get a pullout from issue 73, which is a giant guest star bonanza where we get Daredevil, Thor, and Spider-Man appearing in this Fantastic Four issue. And really cool look at how Jack would draw Daredevil going against Mr. Fantastic. Very fun. And another, just like, I can keep harping on it, but he really uses Reed as such a good motion device to lead you through the page and using the action to really draw your eye down. Interesting to see how this part was whited out. So I wonder if there was a little bit more of the costume there, but it kind of just got a little messy with having Daredevil so close. Turning the page, we get a sequence of the Fantastic Four flying through the air. I believe this is from that issue where that guy was taking the picture of them. And really fun sequence as their ship crashes and Reed has to use his body to wrap up Sue and bounce through the water, kind of like a rock skipping on the surface of the water. And then, wow, I love this here as he's kind of almost becoming like a squid as he hits the water, letting loose, and he's able to save her. More fun pages. Great Kirby tech here. And really cool use of like a full panel as like Reed is reading the newspaper. So we use that to kind of like be the reason this panel's so large to show off all the characters. Ending on some Inhumans. And then we get the Puppet Master and the Hulk. So it's fun to see Jack returning to the Hulk. And we end on a about the artist, about Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was born August 28th, 1917 on the Lower East Side of New York City. You should pause this, give it a read. Really gives a good overview of his history, of all of his work with Marvel, DC, his syndicated newspaper strip like Sky Masters, and then all the way to Jack Kirby's death in February 6th of 1994. And we get one final look at some Jack Kirby art with this awesome in-page spread coming from the giant-sized issue right when they got hit by that blast from Annihilus. Man, wow. And I showed this off a little earlier, but then we end on that look of Reed holding up the cosmic rod. Man, with that Jack Kirby signature. And that has been a look at Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four Artist Edition. I hope you've really enjoyed taking a look at this with me. One of my favorite artist editions ever because it's about my favorite artist. Obviously, there's some other great Jack Kirby artist editions. The Forever People one and the Thor artist edition are also fantastic. Definitely want to take a look at some more artist editions in the future, but I really hope that you've enjoyed flipping through this with me, just soaking up some Jack Kirby art. You know, there's the new Fantastic Four movie coming out, and I just wanted to shine a little light on why the Fantastic Four is so awesome, and it's all because of Jack Kirby. I know looking at books like this always just makes me excited to draw and check out other comics. And if it lit that fire under you too, why not check out some of my comics? I'm a self-published cartoonist, and you can find all my work at danegeorges.com or linked in the description below. On my site, you can find stories like Doomskull, which is about an ex-supervillain that works at a grocery store with his minion Bag Boy, or X-Ray, a collection of my 4-panel webcomics that I'd post on Instagram, Webtoons, or Tapastic, as well as zines like Jiggly Sleepless Sights, and The Passenger. You can find all that and way more at danegeorges.com. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Your support means a lot to me. If you haven't, please consider liking and subscribing, and maybe even ring that bell so you will be notified whenever I post a new episode. You also can become a member of this channel and get videos early and see some behind the scenes on how I'm making these videos and see some of my own artwork. So please consider checking that out. Your support really goes a long way. But until next time, remember to think and read dangerously, and I'll see you in the next episode.